I wasn't supposed to be at school that late. None of us were, really. But the deadline for our group history project was the next morning, and our teacher, Mrs. Harding, had made it clear she wouldn't accept any excuses. "If you care about your grades," she'd said in her usual clipped tone, "you'll find a way to get it done." So there I was, a junior at Franklin High School in Cedar Falls, Illinois, hunched over a library table with Jesse and Mark, both of them as exhausted and irritable as I was. Jessie, with her neatly highlighted notes and color-coded binders, was typing furiously on her laptop, while Mark, whose idea of preparation was skimming Wikipedia 5 minutes before a test, kept sighing dramatically as he flipped through an old textbook. "Can we just wrap this up?" Mark groaned, leaning back in his chair. "We've got enough to scrape by." Jessie shot him a glare. "Scraping by isn't going to cut it. Mrs. Harding will eat us alive if this isn't perfect." I kept my head down, sketching a diagram for the poster we still had to finish. My name's Jake Turner, by the way. I'm the kind of guy who usually stays under the radar. Average grades, a small circle of friends, and no big drama in my life. I've always preferred it that way. But this project had me way out of my comfort zone, especially staying late in an empty school. The clock on the library wall ticked steadily toward 10 p.m. The rest of the school had emptied out hours ago, and even the janitor had stopped making his rounds. It was just the three of us, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the faint echo of our voices in the cavernous, empty building. It was creepy, if I'm being honest. I'd always thought schools were unnerving after dark. The familiar hallways, usually bustling with students, felt strange when they were silent and dimly lit. Every creak of a door or whisper of the wind outside made my pulse quicken, though I tried to play it cool. After all, we were just here to finish a project for our U.S. history class. What could possibly go wrong? "All right," Jessie said, breaking the silence. "Let's split up. I'll finish typing the report. Mark, you handle the bibliography, and Jake..." She glanced at me. "Can you get the poster board from Mrs. Harding's classroom? We left it there after school." I hesitated, not thrilled at the idea of wandering through the empty hallways alone, but I nodded. "Yeah, sure." "Thanks," she said, already turning back to her laptop. I grabbed my phone and headed out of the library, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The hallways felt endless, the dim emergency lights casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and shift as I walked. I kept telling myself there was nothing to be afraid of. It was just an empty school, nothing more. Mrs. Harding's classroom was on the far side of the building, past the science labs and the gym. As I turned a corner, I thought I heard something, a faint rustling sound, like fabric brushing against a wall. I froze, holding my breath, and listened. Nothing. Just my imagination, I decided, and kept walking. By the time I reached the classroom, my nerves were on edge. I opened the door and found the poster board right where we'd left it, propped against the teacher's desk. Grabbing it, I turned to leave and nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard the faint creak of a door closing somewhere down the hall. I stepped out into the hallway, clutching the poster board like a shield. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the emptiness. No answer. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe one of the janitors finishing up. But as I made my way back toward the library, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. A locker door slightly ajar that I was sure had been closed earlier. A faint scuff mark on the floor that hadn't been there before. And then, there were the doors. Several of the exit doors I passed were locked, even the ones that were usually left open at night. By the time I got back to the library, my heart was racing. Jessie looked up as I walked in, her brow furrowing. "You okay? You look pale." "Yeah," I said quickly, setting the poster board down on the table. "Just thought I heard something out there, and some of the doors are locked." "Probably the janitor," Mark said dismissively. not even looking up from his phone. "The janitor left hours ago," Jessie said, her voice quieter now. She glanced toward the library entrance as if expecting someone to walk in. "Maybe we should just finish up and get out of here." "I'm fine with that," Mark said, pushing his chair back and standing up. "This place gives me the creeps." We worked quickly after that, the unease between us palpable. But as the minutes ticked by, the sense of being watched grew stronger. Twice, I thought I saw a shadow move in the hallway outside, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Finally, we finished the project, and Jessie started packing up her things. "Let's just stick together until we're outside, okay?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. Mark and I nodded, and we headed toward the main entrance as a group. But when we got there, the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. And not just locked, chained shut from the inside. For a moment, we all just stood there, staring at the chains. The cold metal links glinted faintly under the dim hallway lights, a stark reminder that something was very, very wrong. Jessie was the first to speak. "Who would do this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted around the hallway, as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. Mark shook his head, his usual bravado replaced with unease. "Maybe it's a prank," he suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "You know, some senior messing around." I didn't buy it. "Why chain the doors? That's not just a prank. That's illegal and dangerous." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. Okay, Jessie said, forcing a deep breath. "We'll just find another way out. There's the side entrance near the gym, right?" "Yeah," I agreed. "Let's try that." We moved together down the hallway, our footsteps unnervingly loud in the stillness. Every shadow seemed to twist and shift as we passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air itself felt heavier, pressing down on us with an almost tangible weight. When we reached the side entrance, my stomach sank. The doors there were locked too, though this time without chains. Jessie rattled the handle, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "This doesn't make any sense," she said. "The doors should be open. They're always open." "Unless someone doesn't want us to leave," I muttered, more to myself than to them. The words hung in the air, and Jessie turned to me, her face pale. "What are you saying, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, not wanting to alarm her further, but the unease in my gut was impossible to ignore. I don't know. But this isn't normal." Mark groaned, running a hand through his hair. "So what now? We're just stuck here?" "Let's check the back entrance," Jessie said quickly, her tone almost desperate. "The one near the cafeteria. It's got to be open." Without waiting for a response, she started walking briskly down the hall. Mark and I exchanged a glance before hurrying after her. None of us wanted to admit it, but the fear was palpable now, tightening its grip with every locked door we encountered. As we passed the library again, I thought I heard something. A faint tapping sound, like footsteps on tile. I stopped in my tracks, straining to listen. "Jake?" Jessie's voice broke through my focus. She and Mark had stopped a few paces ahead, both of them looking back at me. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice low. "Hear what?" Mark said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Footsteps," I said. "Back there." I pointed toward the hallway we'd just come from. Jessie's brow furrowed, and she opened her mouth to respond, but then we all heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing softly in the distance. Slow, deliberate, and coming closer. "Oh my God," Jessie whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking. No answer. "Let's go," I said, my heart pounding. "Now." We quickened our pace, practically jogging toward the cafeteria. The tapping sound continued behind us, growing fainter as we put distance between ourselves and whatever, or whoever, was out there. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, every nerve on edge. "Let's go," I said, my heart pounding. "Now!" We quickened our pace, practically jogging toward the cafeteria. The tapping sound continued behind us, growing fainter as we put distance between ourselves and whatever, or whoever, was out there. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, every nerve on edge. I pulled out my phone, but my stomach sank even further when I saw the screen. "No service," I said grimly. Mark checked his own phone and cursed under his breath. Same here. Jessie was breathing hard, on the verge of panic. I put a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her. "We'll figure this out," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "What if someone's still here?" Jessie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they're watching us?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we needed to stay calm and stick together. The three of us huddled near the door, our eyes darting to every shadow and every faint sound. Somewhere in the distance, the footsteps started again. We stayed huddled near the cafeteria doors for a few moments, our breaths shallow and quick. The footsteps had stopped again, but the silence that followed was somehow worse. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. Every door was locked, and the faint emergency lights in the hallways barely cut through the oppressive darkness. "We have to find another way out," I said finally, trying to sound confident. "Maybe there's a window we can open, or one of the classrooms." Jessie nodded, though her face was pale. Mark's usual bravado was completely gone. He just looked at me, waiting for direction. It was strange to see him like that. He was always the loudest in the room, the guy with the sarcastic comment for everything. Now he was just as scared as the rest of us. "Let's stick together," Jessie said, her voice trembling. "No splitting up. We'll check the classrooms near the science wing first." "Good idea," I said, though I wasn't sure how much good it would do. Still, moving felt better than standing around and waiting for whatever was out there. We started walking again, this time more cautiously. Every creak of the floor and every faint gust of air felt amplified, as if the building itself was alive and watching us. I found myself glancing over my shoulder constantly, half expecting to see someone, or something, lurking just out of sight. When we reached the science wing, I tried the first classroom door, locked. The second one was the same. By the third door, my frustration was building. "Why is everything locked?" Jessie whispered, her voice tight with panic. "It's not just the doors," I said. "It's like someone's making sure we can't get out." "Who would do that?" Mark asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to keep looking." Finally, one of the doors opened. It was a small storage room, cluttered with old lab equipment and boxes of supplies. Jessie stepped inside, her flashlight sweeping over the shelves. "Nothing useful here," she said after a moment. Mark was standing in the hallway, peering nervously down the corridor. "Let's just keep moving. I don't like standing around like this." I nodded, stepping back out into the hall. As I did, something caught my eye. A piece of paper taped to the wall further down the hallway. It hadn't been there earlier, I was sure of it. My heart started to pound as I approached it. The paper was plain, a single sentence scrawled across it in messy handwriting. "You shouldn't be here." I stared at the words, my stomach churning. Jessie and Mark came up behind me, and Jessie let out a small gasp. "Who put that there?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, "but someone's messing with us." Mark ripped the paper off the wall and crumpled it in his fist. "This is insane," he said. "We need to find a way out now." "Wait," Jessie said, pointing down the hall. "Do you see that?" I followed her gaze and felt my blood run cold. At the far end of the hallway, just barely visible in the faint light, was a figure. They were standing perfectly still, their face obscured by the shadows. "Oh my God," Jesse whispered, clutching my arm. "Who is that?" The figure didn't move. They just stood there watching us. My legs felt like lead, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't make myself move. Then, without warning, the figure took a step forward. Just one step, slow and deliberate. "Run," I said, my voice barely audible. "Run!" Jesse and Mark didn't need to be told twice. We turned and bolted down the hallway, our footsteps echoing wildly. I didn't dare look back. All I could think about was putting as much distance as possible between us and whoever that was. We reached the end of the corridor and turned sharply, bursting into another wing of the school. Jessie was gasping for breath, her face pale and terrified. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We find another way out," I said, though I had no idea where to go. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan. Mark pointed toward a stairwell at the end of the hall. "Upstairs. Maybe there's an open window or something." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than nothing. We sprinted toward the stairwell, our footsteps pounding against the tile floor. As we reached the stairs, I glanced back down the hallway. The figure was gone. The stairwell was eerily silent as we climbed, the dim emergency lights casting unsettling shadows on the walls. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I couldn't shake the feeling that every step we took was being watched. Jessie clung to the railing, her breathing shallow and quick, while Mark kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the figure to reappear at any moment. When we reached the second floor, we paused to catch our breath. The hallway stretched out before us, lined with darkened classrooms. Everything was unnervingly quiet. Too quiet. It was as if the usual creaks and hums of the building had been swallowed up, leaving only an oppressive stillness. "What now?" Jessie whispered, her voice barely audible. "We checked the windows," I said. "One of them has to open." Mark nodded, though his face was pale. "Let's make it quick. I don't want to be here any longer than we have to." We moved cautiously down the hallway, trying each window as we passed. Most of them were sealed shut, their handles rusted or jammed. A few wouldn't budge no matter how hard we tried. Frustration and fear were building in equal measure, and I could see it in Jessie's eyes as she struggled with another stubborn latch. "This is useless," she said, her voice trembling. "Why won't anything open?" "Keep trying," I urged, though I was starting to feel the same hopelessness. "We'll find one." Mark's voice broke through the tense silence. "Hey, guys." I turned to see him standing at the end of the hallway, staring at something on the floor. Jessie and I hurried over, and as soon as I saw what he was looking at, my stomach churned. It was another piece of paper, identical to the one we'd found downstairs. The same messy handwriting scrawled across it. "You can't hide." Jessie took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "This is insane," she whispered. "Who is doing this?" I didn't have an answer. My eyes darted around the hallway, searching for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to press closer, and every fiber of my being was screaming that we were not alone. "We need to get out of here," Mark said, his voice shaking. "Forget the windows. Let's find another exit." "And go where?" Jessie asked, her fear tipping into panic. "Every door we've tried is locked. What if we're trapped here?" "We're not trapped," I said firmly, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "There's always a way out. We just have to find it." As if to prove me wrong, a sound echoed through the hallway, a soft, deliberate tapping, like someone gently knocking on a door. It was coming from behind us, back toward the stairwell. All three of us froze, our eyes wide with fear. "Was that—" Jessie started, but she didn't finish the sentence. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and my heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. I grabbed Jessie's arm and started pulling her down the hallway. "Move!" I hissed. Mark didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted ahead of us, his footsteps echoing wildly in the stillness. We rounded a corner and burst into another wing of the school, this one lined with office doors and administrative rooms. The tapping had stopped, but the oppressive silence was back, heavier than ever. "In here," I said, pointing to an open doorway. It led into a supply closet, cramped and filled with shelves of paper and office supplies. It wasn't much, but it was the only place I could think of to hide. Jessie hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "What if they find us?" "Just for a minute," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to figure out what to do next." Reluctantly, she followed me inside, and Mark squeezed in after her. We closed the door as quietly as we could, plunging the small room into near-total darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of my phone screen as I checked for service again. Still nothing. We huddled together, listening intently for any sound of movement outside. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. Who was doing this? Why were they targeting us? And how were we going to get out of here? Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Just when I thought the silence might drive me insane, there was a noise, a slow, deliberate creak of a door opening somewhere nearby. Jessie's hand gripped my arm tightly, and I could feel her shaking. Mark's breathing was shallow and uneven. None of us dared to move. The sound of footsteps followed, heavy and deliberate. They grew louder, closer, until it sounded like they were just outside the closet door. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tense. Whoever it was, they stopped right outside. The doorknob rattled. The rattling stopped, leaving the closet in an oppressive silence. My heart felt like it was about to explode as I stared at the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. Jessie's grip on my arm tightened, her trembling hand mirroring the fear coursing through my body. Mark was frozen, his back pressed against the shelves, barely daring to breathe. I clutched my phone in my free hand, its screen still dimly glowing, though it offered little comfort. My mind raced through options. Wait them out, make a run for it, or try to scare them away. None of them felt particularly good. Then, a sound broke the silence. A faint, deliberate scratching against the door. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. Jessie let out a muffled whimper, and I instinctively put a hand on her shoulder to steady her. "Shh," I mouthed, barely audible. The scratching stopped, replaced by another creak of footsteps. They were walking away, slowly, deliberately. I didn't dare open the door, not yet. We needed to be sure. Minutes passed, though it felt like an eternity. The footsteps faded, leaving us in the suffocating darkness once more. I let out a shaky breath, my mind still reeling. "Are they gone?" Jessie whispered, her voice barely audible. I think so," I replied, though I wasn't convinced. "We need to move. Staying here isn't safe." Mark nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, let's get out of here." I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a second before slowly turning it. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit hallway. It was empty. The air felt heavier than before, like the building itself was holding its breath. "Stick close," I said, stepping out into the hall. Jessie and Mark followed, their footsteps hesitant and quiet. We moved quickly but cautiously, heading toward the main stairwell. My plan was simple: get back to the ground floor and keep searching for an exit. Even if the doors were locked, there had to be a way out, a window, a fire escape, something. As we reached the end of the hallway, a loud bang echoed through the building. It sounded like a door slamming shut, and it came from somewhere below us. Jesse flinched, and Mark cursed under his breath. "They're trying to trap us," Jessie said, her voice shaking. "They're blocking the exits." "Then we'll find another way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come on." As we reached the end of the hallway, a loud bang echoed through the building. It sounded like a door slamming shut, and it came from somewhere below us. Jesse flinched, and Mark cursed under his breath. "They're trying to trap us," Jessie said, her voice shaking. "They're blocking the exits." "Then we'll find another way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come on." But as we turned the corner, I froze. At the far end of the hallway, the figure was back. They stood motionless, silhouetted by the faint glow of a distant exit sign. My stomach twisted into knots as I realized they were holding something. A long, thin object that glinted faintly in the light. "Run," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We turned and bolted in the opposite direction, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I didn't dare look back, focusing only on the sound of our footsteps pounding against the floor. The hallway seemed endless, stretching on as if the building itself was conspiring against us. We veered into a side corridor, bursting through a set of double doors that led into the gymnasium. The large, open space felt both safer and more exposed at the same time. The faint moonlight streaming through the high windows cast eerie patterns across the floor. "The locker rooms," I said, pointing to the doors on the far side of the gym. "We can hide there." Jesse and Mark didn't argue, following me as we sprinted across the gym. The sound of our shoes echoed loudly, and I couldn't help but feel like we were drawing attention to ourselves. As we reached the locker room doors, I threw one open and ushered Jesse and Mark inside. The room was dark and smelled faintly of mildew. Rows of lockers lined the walls, and the faint hum of a distant vent was the only sound. We moved to the back corner, huddling together near the showers. My heart was still racing, and I struggled to catch my breath. "What do we do now?" Jessie asked, her voice trembling. "We wait," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Just for a bit. Maybe they'll think we've gone." Mark shook his head. "What if they come in here?" I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that we had to stay quiet and hope for a miracle. As we sat there in the darkness, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the gym, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Whoever was out there wasn't giving up. They were hunting us. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. We couldn't stay here forever. Sooner or later, we'd have to face whoever was out there, and I wasn't sure we were ready for that. Mark shook his head. "What if they come in here?" I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that we had to stay quiet and hope for a miracle. As we sat there in the darkness, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the gym, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Whoever was out there wasn't giving up. They were hunting us. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. We couldn't stay here forever. Sooner or later, we'd have to face whoever was out there, and I wasn't sure we were ready for that. I motioned for Jesse and Mark to stay still, pointing toward a row of lockers that could provide a better hiding spot. We moved as quietly as we could, crouching behind the metal doors. My legs ached from the tension, but I didn't dare shift. I held my breath, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. Heavy footsteps echoed in the room, growing closer. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They knew we were there. They wanted us to feel the weight of every step, the inevitability of their approach. I motioned for Jesse and Mark to stay still, pointing toward a row of lockers that could provide a better hiding spot. We moved as quietly as we could, crouching behind the metal doors. My legs ached from the tension, but I didn't dare shift. I held my breath, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. Heavy footsteps echoed in the room, growing closer. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They knew we were there. They wanted us to feel the weight of every step, the inevitability of their approach. My mind raced. We couldn't stay hidden any longer. If they found us, we'd be cornered. I looked at Mark and Jesse, both of them pale and terrified. I gestured toward the opposite exit, a second door that led to the gym storage area. If we moved fast, we might have a chance to get out before they could react. I counted silently in my head. 1, 2, 3. We bolted, our shoes skidding on the slick tile floor. The figure let out a sharp, guttural sound, something between a shout and a growl, and the chase was on. My lungs burned as we sprinted through the storage room, weaving between racks of equipment. I could hear the heavy footsteps behind us, relentless and unyielding. The storage room led to another hallway, and we burst through the door, slamming it shut behind us. Mark grabbed a nearby chair and wedged it under the handle, buying us a few precious seconds. "Keep moving!" I yelled, adrenaline propelling me forward. We ran down the hallway, turning corners blindly, our only goal to put as much distance as possible between us and our pursuer. Finally, we stumbled into the main office, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. My eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that could help. "There!" Jesse shouted, pointing to a landline phone on the receptionist's desk. No, I muttered, slamming the receiver down. "It's dead." Mark grabbed my shoulder, his face pale. "We can't stay here, they'll find us." He was right. We needed to keep moving. But as we turned to leave, the office door burst open, the figure silhouetted against the dim hallway light. They stepped inside, blocking our only exit. In the harsh, fluorescent light, I could finally see them clearly. It was a man, his face obscured by a black balaclava. In his hand, he held a crowbar, its metal surface gleaming ominously. His posture was calm, almost casual, as if he knew he had all the time in the world. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice cracking despite my attempt to sound brave. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step closer, the crowbar tapping against the floor with a chilling rhythm. My mind raced. We were out of options, out of places to run. Then I spotted it. A fire alarm mounted on the wall near the back of the office. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. I nudged Jessie and pointed to it. Her eyes widened, but she nodded, understanding immediately. "Cover me," I whispered. Jessie grabbed a stapler from the desk and hurled it at the man. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him flinch. I sprinted toward the fire alarm, my heart pounding. Just as he turned his attention back to me, I slammed my hand against the alarm, pulling the lever with all my strength. A deafening siren blared through the building, and red strobe lights flashed in every hallway. The man hesitated, clearly not expecting this turn of events. It was the distraction we needed. "Go!" I shouted, and we bolted past him, dodging as he swung the crowbar wildly. His movements were clumsy, and we managed to slip through the door, back into the hallway. The fire alarm had done more than just disorient him. It had also unlocked the emergency exits. We sprinted toward the nearest one, the cool night air hitting our faces as we burst outside. I didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot, where a handful of emergency vehicles were already pulling in, their lights piercing the darkness. We collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for breath as paramedics and police officers swarmed around us. The man in the balaclava didn't follow. He was either still inside or had slipped away in the chaos. Either way, we were safe. As the officers questioned us, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. We had been hunted, trapped in a place that should have been safe. And though we were alive, the memory of that night would stay with us forever. I don't know who the man was or why he chose us, but one thing is certain. I'll never look at my school the same way again. If you like these stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell to listen to new stories from Mr. Fear every day. Also, let us know in the comments if you've had any scary stories while at school. Thank you for watching.